Good evening. Good morning, wherever you are. So tonight, Dwayne and I have something to talk about that if it hadn't started affecting you yet, it's fixing to. Jeff had to be out. He had somewhere that he had to be tonight. So we're going to see if we can't make him proud. Dwayne, how are you?
I'm good. I ain't as pretty as you, but I'm
good. You getting any rain?
Oh my God, man. We've gotten over 15 inches of rain this month. We got 7 inches at one time. That was not this past Thursday, but Thursday before. We got 7 inches at one time in about 3 hour period. It's I think of duct tape flippers for chickens, just keep them afloat in the pens.
That has been pretty rough. We have here in Alabama the last, I believe, 3 months in a row, we have received record levels of rain for everything.
Well, today's not over yet. I'm sorry, I said today's not over yet, but today is the first day in a week that we haven't got rain in my house. But today ain't over yet.
Well, my friend, I hate to tell you, but it's on its way. It's in Alabama right now. I was sitting here a while ago getting ready for the show and everything, and I heard noise. Like I thought it wasn't going to rain today. Then I go look outside and I have horizontal rain.
We got an inch last night, almost an inch last night, and around yesterday afternoon around 5 o'clock. And I talked to Tony Manning. He's in North Carolina, Stokes, North Carolina. I talked to him this morning, and they got 6 inches yesterday afternoon at Stokes.
Well,
so
the way that all ties in, with that, all the rain and everything else, it is stressing the birds out.
Well, there's a lot more. The humidity makes the feathers heavier too, because they hold moisture and causes them feathers to fall out faster, in my opinion.
I agree. And that's why, we're going to cover a lot of stuff here in the Molt when we're talking about it, ways to manage it like a pro, because personally, I feel like if you catch it right when it starts and you manage it, you can make it to where the birds drop their feathers really fast, and then you can start feeding them really well and get them to come out of the molt in 6 weeks total, 8 weeks, something like that. Because we'll talk about some different ways to do it. That bird right there belongs to Timothy Chew. He sent me that picture a while back. He's actually the first person that ordered the molt ration. Yeah, that gray. I was talking to Jeff today about what should I have at the front of the presentation. He said, put one of your grays, put it out in the grass, get a nice pretty picture. I said, I ain't been home in like 2 weeks. My grass looks horrible.
Yeah.
So I use Tim's. Cool. So in the molt, there's a lot of stuff happening. Your birds are losing their feathers, they're losing their minds, and hopefully they also lose some weight. This time of year is kind of rough on them because their body temperature, normally a chicken's body temperature is close to 100 degrees. A lot of folks don't realize that. So when you pick them up, they feel kind of warm. That's why folks like us, we don't care how cold it is in wintertime. They staying outside because, they stay warm. The molt is driven by hormonal changes, and a lot of those are caused by stress. So what I think is that, with all the rain that we're getting right now and people's runs being flooded and they're 38 by 38s or whatever they're using being flooded, and you got birds up on top of a TP or a barrel, looking for a P-row to come by so they can get to the other side of the yard. It's happening. They're feeling like crap. They're not comfortable. They're lethargic, just like you would if you had the flu symptoms yourself. So, that's why a lot of people like me, myself, I'm already started to see a lot of those symptoms, and I've started to see feathers drop too because of the added stress, because of the way the climate is. It's also.
I went around. I was gonna say I went around today around lunchtime. And freshened all my water up. And around lunchtime, I put everybody fresh water. I run and got some feed and come back about 2:30, 2:45. I started feeding, and one of my Kelso stags from last year, there was 2 fresh wing feathers laying in the bottom of the pen. There wasn't there when I watered. So it's definitely coming.
It's coming. So, I just think that it's important that if you monitor it, you can make it happen quick. While your birds are molting, we've even had record heat and humidity. Plenty of shade, if at all possible. Now, like in my background here, you got this barrel field. Birds are like dogs when it comes to houses. It'll be pouring down rain and they still won't get in it. They'll be on top of it. But if they get too hot, having somewhere to go is important. Lots of water, like you did, you refresh your water cups. That works great. I use in a lot of my brood pens bell waters, and they're fed by 5-gallon buckets. And what I'll do in the mornings, if it's going to be above 90 that day, I got a deep freeze in my brooder house that's got bottles of water like this in it. Just I like the cheap 16-ounce bottles that the ones your dogs really love because they make all that racket. I like that because you don't even have to open them up and take a sip out of it. You just put them in the freezer, they swell up and they won't bust. But if you put 4 or 5 of them down in your water and then go to the other end and bleed it off, so everything coming through is cool, it gives them cool water. This is a process. People need to learn it, and they need to understand how it works, what their birds are doing, because we're talking about chickens. We're not talking about women. So we got to understand them, and we got to figure out how to work with it. So knowing what's going on is important.
The birds that are in that barrel yard behind you, they will molt sooner than birds are in the shade. And the molt will come on harder for them, and they'll drop their feathers first, just from being exposed to all that sun. Because I know I have one side of my yard is shaded more so than the other, and the pins that are under those shade trees, they drop last, they drop slower, and it takes them longer to grow their feathers back also, because they're not getting that vitamin D.
Yep. And there's a couple ways, like me personally, like I said before, and I was having a conversation with somebody offline about this too, is when you're forcing a molt can be extremely stressful on the birds. But I'm a firm believer in once you see those feathers come out, you need to manage it and manage it fast, and you need to be ready for it. And this is a recipe that Jeff put together that, you know, I understand that everybody doesn't have access to all this stuff. But I wanted you to see the protein levels. You should be looking at 11 to 12% protein for your birds, which is really low, but that's what we need right now. So this would be the time to take that 5-way at the store that looks good, looks like candy. Take that 5-way and also buy you some. You can buy some wheat mids. They sell them at the feed store, and mix them 50-50.
That's right. Well, I cut my yard feed when I'm preparing for molt. I take my normal yard feed and I cut my normal yard feed 50-50 with scratch, with a good scratch, and that drops the protein level down on it. And I still put the oil in it like I do all year long.
Right.
But I keep the oil to them, and I keep the I drop the protein there. But I think it makes a difference. And I usually do that for about 3 weeks.
That's about right.
3 to 4 weeks, and then I'll go ahead and bump the protein back up.
One thing you can do is if you take what you just said, your yard feed, and cut it with some scratch. And let's say you're mixing 50 pounds. So you take 25 pounds of that and then put 25 pounds of wheat mids in there with it.
Yeah.
Wheat mids do have some protein. You know, they do have some nutritional value, but the main thing that I'm after with the wheat mids is the fiber.
Right.
They're really, really high in fiber. And so at this point in time, you want the amino acids to be low. You know, you want 0.5, 0.4 lysine. You want the methionine to be very minimal, because right now you don't want to promote feather growth and feather health. You want to help that bird shed them a lot. And a lot of times when birds are, the more stressed they are, the more likely they are to shed their feathers. So that kind of supports that. And it also, when you cut the protein down, you cut the fat down really low, you put your fiber up really high, and you make sure, don't stop the vitamins. Keep the vitamins there. But
that's right.
In doing that, you make sure that your birds have a healthy, really quick diet, essentially, because you want them to shed those feathers. And, you know, I know nobody watching this show feeds their birds too much feed. And I know nobody gives them too much candy or, you know, too many treats or watermelon or anything like that. But believe it or not, birds do get fat, just like we do. And, you know, right now, if you get that weight down low, back to what it was when they were a pullet or a cockerel, after the molt, once they lose that weight, once they lose that feather, then you switch them over to a really, really good feed, loaded in amino acids, loaded in vitamins and minerals, use the oil, all that good stuff. Because when you put that nutrition to them real fast like that, once they shed them all, then you're going to start seeing them push the rest of the feathers out with their new feather growth. So, let's see.
You need to make sure there's plenty of fresh water, clean water. If you have to water multiple times a day, because if you water early in the morning and don't water again till the next morning, they're not, in the afternoon, they're not going to drink that water that's 95 degrees. If it's 95 degrees outside and hang inside the pen all day, even if it's in the shade, it's going to be ambient temperature by the afternoon, and they're not going to drink that water. And if they can't stay hydrated, it's going to hinder that feather development.
And this would be the time to get apple cider vinegar in their water. that's going to get them to drink even more water, and that'll benefit the process as well. You know, and like you said, with fresh, clean water, I think we skipped over right here. That Jeff told me to make sure I stress this. He said, take a cup or a glass with you out there, stick it down in one of your watering cups, or dump one of your water cups in it. If you won't drink it, your birds shouldn't be drinking it either. So,
well, I finished up today. I had a few pins that I hadn't replaced, hadn't put new copper fittings in them yet, but I put the rest of the copper fittings in mine to cleaned out all the waters and gave them fresh water. And I'll water mine. I water mine in the morning and in the afternoon because I don't want to go to bed thirsty and dehydrated from a full day of that heat.
So you actually taught me something the other day when we were talking. You were watering your birds, and you were talking about how you got an extension of hose that goes on the end of your nozzle. And so I got on Amazon, of course, and I got me some a hose repair kit, and I cut 3 feet off the end of my hose and put it on the end of my nozzle, and put my nozzle back on. And man, you just set that in your water cup, and hit it, and it shoots. It don't matter how much dirt they put in there, it shoots it right out. And
because when you put that piece of hose, if you take your sprayer and you just squeeze it and spray the handle, it's going to spray 20 feet up in the air because you got pressure. But when you put a short piece of hose on the end of your spray nozzle, it cuts off that air source, and it just flows up. At whatever size diameter your hose is, it fills that hose, and you get a flow of water out the size of that hose diameter, and it'll flush your cups right out.
Yeah, it really does. And I thought that was really handy. Let's see. Daniel says that he's feeding Jeff's pellet. What should he mix with it, and at what percentage to get to a 12 to a 14% mix? I'm not 100% sure which pellet you're talking about, but if it's the one that I think you're talking about, if you mix it 50-50 with wheat mids, you're going to cut that protein down a good bit, and you're going to make the fiber go really high, which is two of the main things that we should be after right now. When he and I had that conversation, that he said, you want to cut the protein down 11-12%. You want the fiber to go up to 8 or 9%. You want the fat to drop to 2%, which in regular feed, it's that low just about anyway.
Right.
He said, but you definitely need to keep the vitamins. So that's what I would do. Let's see. Here's the other one. Should your feed after the feed mix on the screen be higher in certain areas than your regular feed? Yes. It should be higher in vitamins. It should be lower in everything else.
Now, if you're using that VitaPro in the water, you'd probably be okay with not raising the vitamin levels in your feed if they get the food or water. As long
I was going to say, if you're putting it in, if you're doing that, then that would work. But the main thing that's important is to keep the vitamins there. In the sense of like people, chickens can go without eating if they have vitamins. So they got to get them somewhere. Now, I was waiting on somebody You offer old people?
No, I offer oyster shells more often during the molt. I keep it more often during the molt because I just feel like there's more calcium, and they need that more calcium along with it. And I offer more grit too than normal. during the molt, because usually during the molt times you have a lot more wet pens, a lot more muddy pens. We get a lot more rain and a lot more stuff, that's causing a problem with your pens. So I try to offer grit more frequently during this time of the year, as well as the oyster shells and stuff this time of the year, just to kind of make sure they're good, because when your pens are all muddy, wet, nasty from tropical depression, storms, thunderstorms in the afternoon, and all that sort of stuff, they're not going to dig through that mud to get that.
No, they're
not going to peck. They're not going to peck at the mud. They're not going to peck at the mud to get that. So I mean,
I
make sure the bottom of my cup.
I'm not trying to peck at it to. If I got the choice to get something out of a cup or out of the mud, that's easy. John says he uses automatic water cups that hook directly to a hose. John, I really like that idea, and I will say that I do that too. I don't use the cups. Well, on my fly pens, I use the cups because I have some that actually mount to the wire. But between the cups, anything that you do that's automated like that is great. But I will say in the summertime when it's really, really hot, it has its downsides, which is why I fill the reservoir up with bottles of ice. Now, the reason I say that is because if anybody's left a hose pipe out in the yard on a summer day, and then you go out there and you squeeze the nozzle and you hit your hand with it, it's just about going to burn because it's so hot. So if you have an automatic water system like that, go out there in the morning time, have you a valve on the end of it, open it up and let that thing free flow until all the water out of the hose pipe and all comes all the way through it, and you start feeling cool water. And if you could do that a couple times a day, your birds would love you for that.
Most people use that black irrigation tubing with the drip irrigation line coming off of it, and run it into the water cups, and everything there is black and everything. And I'll be honest with you, I went to Harbor Freight last year, and they had white garden hose, and I thought to myself, it's a white hose. It's going to be less thermal mass there as far as the black to radiate the heat into it, absorb the heat.
Makes sense.
The water gets just as damn hot in that white hose as it does a black hose.
Yep. I mean, it might be a degree or two difference, but I mean, there's been times that I've picked up a hose pipe and like had red spots.
It'll burn
because it burns so bad.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Let's see. Daniel says I feed 3 ounces feed per day, 1 in the morning, 2 in the evening. Should I go to half of that for the molt or just drop it to 1 and 1? I think 1 and 1 would probably be easier to measure. And that I think that's going to be enough. If you cut it in half, that'd be 1.5 and 1.5. So, being technical, a lot of people will do that. But, when Jeff says feed 2 ounces per bird per day for a molt feed, that's using a quality feed, which I know Daniel does. For somebody that, just gets some pellets and some scratch and matches it and mixes it up, feed half that amount. By weight, not measurement. So just because you feed a Vienna can, half that Vienna can doesn't mean it weighs half the amount. So half of it by weight, not by volume. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, if you got 2 birds in the pen, instead of throwing 2 cans of food in there, just throw 1.
So
that's half.
This question says, should you drop your supplement during the molt? That's going to depend on the feed that you're starting with, because you do, if you're starting with like a Kalmbach flock maker or something that has decent levels of amino acids and vitamins and all that stuff to begin with, then I would say yes, cut it. If you're not, then don't cut it because they still need the vitamins. Just cut the amount that you feed every day. Or you can
I'm
also
assuming he's talking about Rapido.
Yeah.
I said I'm assuming he's talking about Rapido, right?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you what I do. I do not to Jeff is not always the happiest with what I do, but I don't feed it. I don't feed it 7 days a week like he suggests. I feed it 4 days a week, and I use Rapido 4 days a week. And now I probably add a little bit more than his suggested dosages on those 4 days. But during the molt for that 1 month, I dropped back to 2 days a week for 1 month. Then when I start back and I feed it 7 days a week for 2 weeks, and I drop back to 5 days a week after that until they get all their feathers back in. And that's how I do it. That's what works for me. But I use my normal yard feed, and I drop back and I only use Rapido twice a week. And I'll do it on a Monday and on a Thursday, twice a week. And then I do that for a month. And after that month's out, and I see the feathers dropping good, I will change my feed back up, start feeding them a normal ration of feed, and I'll use the Rapido to boost up everything back in the feed and get the feather development started and coming in. And that's what I do. That's what works for me.
And that's the most important thing about all of it is working for you.
And the most important thing is I don't feed styrofoam.
I was gonna say you don't feed styrofoam, and that's always a great thing. And I will say this: ideally, it would be best if they had it every day. But I also know that you don't feed a crappy base feed to begin with, because there's a lot of people that go to Tractor Supply and get a $13 bag and add some Rapido to it and expect a miracle, and it don't work that way. So
you can't go and buy. You can't walk in the feed store and say, Can I get 100 pounds of the cheapest laying pellets you have in the store, and then I want 100 pounds of the mill ground scratch that looks like someone dropped a bucket of baby powder in it. It's so dusty, and you can't even tell what color the corn is or what color the wheat is. And that's what mill ground scratch here looks like. When you go to the local feed mill here, it looks like you put diatomaceous earth on it already in the bag. But I don't even use it. And when you put it, if you pour it in a bucket and fill it full of water, it'll have a 1/4 inch deep of sludge on top of the water when it all floats off.
Yeah. So this is a post molt feed ration. Protein that back up to 19-20%. The fat is going to be right at 6%. This is the time that you would stop adding the wheat mids or whatever you were doing to get your fiber up really high. And the person that asked the question about the vitamins before, if you'll notice in this ration, the vitamins are a little bit lower. There again, when you're feeding them a low protein diet, in order for them to keep their health, you need to supplement them with the vitamins. So, yeah.
Well, one thing we haven't talked about, is worming during the molt. And I still think you need to worm during the molt. And I think that's important for healthy development and for maintaining the body during the molt is worming. And you don't want to pick them up and you don't want to handle them during the molt because they're sore. Feathers are bleeding. The blood feathers coming in and everything. So I use, and like I said, this is what works for me. It might not work for you, but it's what works for me. During that molt, during a couple of months during the summer when it's molt, I just buy that Safeguard goat wormer, and I take wheat or oats one. I put enough wormer in a bucket for 3 gallons of water. I soak 2 gallons of that oats or wheat in the water, and then I mix that 50-50 with my dry feed, and I worm them. It's not ideal. It's not 100%, but it works, and they're still getting the wormer. And that goat wormer, the Safeguard, is fenbendazole and pesaquintal, I think it is what's in it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, doing it that way, you're being easy on them. I think he ain't saying pick them up like 2 weeks into it and shove a pill down their throat. By mixing it in with the feed like that, it's more gentle on their bodies, especially if you do it at the very beginning because the molt beats them up.
And I've never liked mixing, whether it be wormer or antibiotic or anything else. I've never liked mixing it and putting it in the water, because we all know you got half a gallon water cups hanging on 10 pins in a row. They're all in the same environment. They all got the same amount of heat. They all got the same amount of shade. They all got the same amount of direct sunlight. 5 pins, 10 pins in a row, all with the same half-gallon water cups. And you mix that wormer up and put it in that water, they're not all going to drink the same amount of water. And by mixing it with the feed and blending it in with the feed and feeding it out, I'm feeding every bird the same amount. So,
right.
My chances of getting the right amount of wormer per bird is a lot greater, I think.
And also during the molt, when you're feeding half the amount, they're going to eat it faster. So it's all going in.
And I've tried going out first and just taking, like, let's say if I use oats. And when I say I use oats, I don't like sour oats because I don't want that stinking shit on my hand. You know what I'm saying? So I just use regular. I don't soak mine for 24 hours. I soak mine 24 hours, and in 24 hours, that oat is swollen. All it's going to swell. It's soaked up as much moisture as you can. I went out and tried to, I'd go by and give each one of them a ration of oats, and then come back in 30 minutes and give them a half ration of oats and a half ration, give them a half ration of oats first, then give them a half ration to feed later. And they seem to eat the oats better for me if it's mixed in with the feed. They clean it up a lot better than it does if I just try to feed them straight oats.
Yep.
So, and not only that, I mean, there's a certain amount of moisture from those oats are going to soak into your pellet. They're going to soak into the other. Most feeds have more than one kind of pellet in it, so they soak into that, and that's something they naturally going to eat anyway. So it kind of goes off.
That's right.
And
so Kona said, should you still add oil on the feed during the molt, and should it be a little higher than normal? So for the purpose of the oil is 2 things. Number one is going to help the powder bond to the food. Number 2, it increases the fat level because most feeds, the fat is in the 3, maybe up to 4% range. And it should be closer to 6 or 7 or 8, depending on what you're doing. During this time, I would use half the amount of oil so you can have just enough to bond the vitamins to the feed, but you don't want to raise your fat percentage too much.
Well, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, unless if he's just using a pelletized food, or if he's just using pelletized food with a scratch feed in it or something, or grain in it, and it don't have any sunflower seeds in it at all. I would probably still add a good bit of oil to if it was me, because there's no oil in those pellets. They're none to mention. And most scratch feed, or most, if you just mixing, I know a lot of guys who mix pellets, they'll mix all flocks pellet, corn and wheat. And the birds, they're not getting a lot of oil from that. So.
Now, John brings up a good point.
You can tell
John said he uses olive oil, which is lower in fat. And I know a lot of people will hear Jeff talk about how he likes beef tallow, coconut oil, olive oil, and then anything that you would eat. That's because those are lower in fat. And olive oil also has some pretty good omegas, which is really good for the birds as well. So,
Carey, my grandma had yard chickens, just regular old meat chickens, and every year when they start losing feathers, she would go out there and she'd get a big chunk of fat back, and she'd soak it in boiling water, get a pot of water boiling, and drop it down in it, let it set. And she'd pour the salt water off, and then she'd soak it again 2 or 3 times to get most of the salt out of it. And then she'd punch a hole through the rind and hang it up in the pen for them to peck on to get the oil they needed. She done that my whole entire life. All during the molt, she'd kept a chunk of fat back hanging up in that pen. And there was enough salt left on it, the flies and stuff didn't bother it. But the chickens would sit there and peck at it as they needed. And they would eat it and get the nutrients out of it and get the oil out of it.
You know, that's something I got to hand it to them. You know, chickens, they seem like they're really stupid. But when it comes to stuff like that, they know what they need.
Oh yeah.
So,
well, that's just like I use that pelletized bedding to dry my pens up with all this rain we've been getting. I've had people tell me, "Man, I ain't using that." You know, they'll eat them pellets, and the pellets swell up inside them. They got enough sense to know. They pick that pellet up. They'll pick up one of those pellets and they'll feel it in their mouth and they'll realize it ain't food. They'll spit it. They drop it right down. They don't pick up. They might pick up 1 or 2, but I haven't seen any swallow any, and not had any issues with them eating them and swelling up in their craw and causing them to be crop bound.
So I thought the same thing. I was like, I mean, this looks like a pellet. They're gonna eat it. But you get you a handful of them and smell it, and get a handful of your feed and smell it. You're not going to eat it either.
If your pens are super wet, that stuff takes like 3 minutes, and it's done swollen up and falling apart.
Yep.
It don't lay on the ground long.
But you know, what it leaves behind is not a bad thing for the birds. You know that.
No, because if you go buy
not going to cause a problem.
If you go buy a bale of pine shavings from Walmart or from Lowe's, or not Lowe's, but a Tractor Supply. Our Tractor Supplies here do not keep those shavings indoors. They keep them outside stacked on a pallet. And when we get 10 inches of rain, those shavings saw 10 inches of rain too. And a lot of times they'll be wet in the center of the bale, or be wet on one end of the bale, or whatever. So them wet shavings ain't gonna suck up a lot of moisture out of the ground. Where that pelletized bedding, it's like it's instant. I mean, you can go buy. You can have a pen that's just sloppy mud. I mean, chickens bogging 2 inches deep in mud, and throw a layer of pellets down and come back in 45 minutes. And they mixed them pellets all in. It's dried the dirt out enough. They started scratching the dirt again, and it's all blended together. You can't even see where the pellets are even in there.
I mean, I like it because you can just throw a pile of them in there. What I do is, you know, I've got the 38 by 38s. And I've got a 5-foot tarp that goes all the way over the top and down on the bottom. I think it's like a 8-inch gap. It covers all but that. So what I'll do is I'll walk up behind them, and I've got one of them big wide grain shovels. It's like 16 inches wide. I have those in that, and I'll just slide them up under there so, you know, it doesn't make them go as crazy. And they'll take the pile, and you know, by the time you get done doing all of them, the first one, they'll spread it out real nice and neat. They're pawing their feet around on it, cleaning their feet up and all that. You know, it's working out pretty good.
Yeah, and I would tell you, there ain't nothing worse than going out there to feed, and as you walking down the row of pens throwing out feed, the chickens ahead of you are hitting the next pen over. They're flying up against the wire with that mud all over their feet, and they're flinging it up. It's going in your eyes and your ears and everywhere else. There ain't nothing worse than that.
No, I had about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was walking through my chicken yard the day after we'd had a monsoon, and I was checking on the birds and looking at them, and my wife comes around the corner and she yells out something, and I go, huh? And about that time, all in my face, down my shirt. I was so mad. It got me.
You should have went and give her a big kiss.
Man,
well, with all this rain, man, I put out. We've had so much rain this month so far. I went to Tractor Supply 2 weeks ago, and I bought 6 bales of the extra fine pine shavings because they were out of the pellet bed. And I bought 150 pound of lime. I come out and I put the 150 pound of lime out. I put out those 6 bales of pine shavings as well as 2 bales I had here already. I went back last Friday and I bought 8 bags of the pelletized bed and another 100 pounds of lime. I put out more lime, more shavings. And as I was picking the bags up off the ground to put in the fire barrel, it started thundering. We got 1.5 inches within an hour after me putting that bed in. And were my pins muddy again? Absolutely. But were they as muddy as they would have been? Probably not.
Nope. Kona here says, would it be a good time to run the jitter juice in the water? Yes, it would. The molasses that's in it, the vinegar that's in it, the garlic that's in it is all going to be really good for the birds. And it's going to get them to drink more water and help them stay hydrated. So this would be a good time to run that in. And John says, my chickens would starve before they eat pellets. Mine won't eat pellets. I've had instances where I have ran out of feed and had to send my guy to a local place, which is kind of ridiculous. I got 6,000 square feet of warehouse and there wasn't a bag of chicken feed in it. And I had to send him to go get some pellets. And, I went by probably about 3 or 4 hours after he had left, and none of them touched. And so I was like, I need them to eat because I'll make them some food tomorrow, but I need them to eat tonight. So I got the hose and I wet it a little bit. Not ideal, but it broke up the pellet enough for them to actually eat it.
Well, I think it's just a custom to what they get. I mean, I think if you fed them a pelletized food every day for a few days, they would eat it. It's kind of like.
Well, I mean, if they start to starve, they probably would. But mine have never had it. A lot of my chickens have never had a pellet.
Well, that's kind of like Jerry Clower. He had that joke, you remember? Said that man asked him, what you feed your dog? He said, I feed my dog collard greens. He said, Lord, my dog wouldn't eat collard greens. He said, mine wouldn't eat it for a month.
Yeah. That's right.
I don't know if you ever heard that joke or not, but yeah. But it's
I'm very familiar with lots of Jerry Clower. He's one of my favorites. So with talking about all that and the muck and all that crap, Jeff and I last week, we actually had a conversation about setting up a yard. And I asked him, I said, look, if you have to protect your birds with like the 38 by 38s or whatever type pen you decide to use, or if they're on tie cords, either one, what would you do? And we talked about it for a while, and he said that, so the rocks, like the bed rocks that they put down for roads, it's about 1 inch in size. Yeah. The really big ones, they're used for driveways a lot too. He said he put down like,
It's called 57 stone.
57 stone. I didn't realize that was the thing, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down. So when I call and ask for some, they won't be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
He said 4 to 6 inches of that, and then the smaller rocks, 1 to 2 inches of that, and then sand on top of that. Only about 1 or 2 inches of sand. He said if you sand will cause too much sand will cause their feathers to dry out. And which, when they drag it, it makes sense because dragging them across sand is like dragging it across sandpaper. So that made sense. But he said if you build the yard up with a gravel like that, it gets it enough of a buffer to where the rain is going to flow right through it. And I said, well, will that not be too hard on your bird's feet? He said, no, because you're going to have the sand on top, which it rains enough, the sand's going to go through unless you have the smaller rocks up underneath it. And so I'm looking at getting a couple loads of that 57 stone and laying that out and doing something along those lines to eliminate that problem. Because is a rock tough on their feet? It can be, but they should be on the roost pole anyway.
Well, the biggest problem you'll have with that is if they get down through to that 57 stone, if they jump off the roost pole onto the ground and land on that. Because I know a guy here who has a lot of those longleaf pine trees in his yard, and where his tie cord yard is, he has a lot of problem with those roosters on the tie cord with bumblefoot because they fly off them barrels and land on top of those pine cones, especially when they fall off green, and they'll injure their sole of their foot, and they'll have bumblefoot issues.
Well, maybe need to put down some peat moss or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe
it's just a thought to irrigate that area. Because when it happens,
you could probably be honestly, and you could probably, if you wanted to, you could go there. If you had trenches cut and had them full of that rock and made like French drains and set your pins up on the edge of those trenches so that they could drain out, the pea gravel would be a good idea to put it down and then put sand on top of that. But I don't know about the 57 stone, but I would the pea gravel.
But the 57 stone, I think, was to create that gap between the dirt and the bottom, and the really small rocks is to kind of fill in the gaps with that. So when you put the sand or whatever on top, that it won't fall through. But I mean, Dougie says too, he's seen people use pea gravel, so that would probably work.
Yeah, the pea gravel will work. I know the pea gravel will work. I've used pea gravel in some of my pens that was having drainage issues. I bought bags of pea gravel and I just poured them in a straight line. I dug like a trench with a shovel, poured bags of pea gravel in a straight line, and then I just filled it over with dirt, and the water runs out into the furrow where pea gravel is, toward the ditch. And they'll dig down into pea gravel, but once they get to that hard surface, they'll stop. They slow down anyway.
I don't know, but I've thought about that, and I've also thought about just freaking pouring a concrete pad. Because I really hate for them to just have all that muck and stuff.
The mud is, and ideally, and it's unreasonable for Gamefowl people, but ideally, if you had every one of your pens set up as a small chicken tractor and could move it every 3 days, that would be ideal, or once a week would be ideal. But most of us have consumed every inch of space we have to the point to where our pens are where they are, and they may as well be concreted into the ground. Like with me, I try to get a load of sand delivered once a year, and usually in the fall, and I'll move all my pens off of one side of the yard and my wife with birds in them, and I'll haul that sand in, till the ground up, put a layer of that sand down, move all the pins back on that fresh dirt, and I'll lime it, I'll till it, I'll put fresh dirt in and rake it out good and level, move the pins back on, and I move another section of yard out onto the grass in the front yard.
So that's the thought that I had with my 38 by 38s when I put the 2x6 around the bottom.
Yeah.
So the little hoops that you can get to screw onto like the deck of a trailer to tie your lawnmower down or whatever. Mm. So I put those on opposing corners of the wood.
You just pull it.
Yeah. So I have a piece of rebar that I made that's about 2-ish feet long, got a hook on one end and a T on the other. And I can reach down and I use stakes like what you do in your rooster yard. I use them stakes, pull them stakes up, and I'll hook to the hook and I'll pull it over on the fresh ground. And then I'll hammer the stakes back in the ground because I have to use the stakes because freaking, you know, if you don't like the weather in Alabama, wait 30 minutes, it'll change. And I've actually had those pins get blown over by wind when they had a concrete cap block on top of it. So,
yeah. Well, I have mine all in rows because I gotta have it in a row. It's gotta be straight in a row. And I have that 39-inch wide 10 like goes on everybody's house now, and I have it in 15-foot pieces, and I have all my pins in rows. And I just went to Harbor Freight, and they got stainless steel tie wire. It's aviation tie wire, and I wrapped it on one side of the pin, brought it over and tied it to the other side, and that's what holds the 10 down on the bottom of the pin. And I got one strand of wire for every pin, and the water runs the full length. Even if I had to put 2x2s up under the water rails to get it sloped. Mm-hmm. I got it all runs off the end. It pours off the end. And because I have a lot of oak trees, and I have the worst problem in the spring of the year because those little pollen sacs off the oak trees were filling my water cups. When I had individual roofs on them, every day I change the water cups, dump them, and put new water cups in them. They'd be jam full of. And then in the fall of the year, they fill full of acorns. So I went and got 10, and I got that 10 run the full length, and it keeps all my water cups are under a roof. And but
nice.
Like this week with all the rain we've had, and it's horizontal rain part of the time, the pins are still flooded because of that. Yeah. And I got 2x6s around all my 39 by 39 pins. And cut 2 pieces 40.5, 2 pieces 37.5, and when you screw it all together, it makes a 40.5 square. And I got a 1.25 inch staple gun that shoots 1.25 inch crown staples, and I just stapled the pin right to the top of that 2x6, and there's that 2x6 around the bottom of it gives enough weight. It ain't gonna flip over, too easy. And then when I have that 10 running the full length of it, it's trying to flip over 3 pins instead of 1.
Yeah, see, so I had that, and I had the tarp going over the top and down the back to provide the shade. And we had some like 60, 70 mile an hour gust winds one night. And, I go out and I'm putting cap blocks on the corners of them. Yeah. And I actually had one of them pop off and fly with that on it. So it is rough, but I have seen instances where people would use pipe, and they would line their pins up, and they would put a piece of 1-inch pipe through all of them and anchor that down to the ground on each side, and the birds use that as a roost. So,
yeah. Well, we need to. Carey, is it okay if we remind everybody about the UGA convention coming to Myrtle Beach?
We need to.
And we need to remind everybody of the UGA convention coming in August. The Friday meeting will be for the board of directors of the UGBA and the president, and vice president, secretary, treasurer, whatever. But then the Saturday meeting will be open to all members of the UGBA. whether you're an at-large member or a state affiliated member. And there'll be Friday night. We got a DJ coming Friday night. There'll be some finger foods, that kind of stuff, for like a meet and greet on Friday night from 7 to 10. And Saturday after the meeting, we'll have a buffet banquet. You can purchase tickets or you can purchase them, and the motel rooms, they're going kind of fast, and we have a certain allotment blocked out, and the rooms are $179 a night. And if that block out fills up, there'll be $317 a night. So if you want a room, you better go ahead and get it. As well as the banquet will be $55, and it's gonna be a buffet style. And I think
we're gonna have a buffet for the banquet.
Mm-hmm. Well, typically in years past, it's been an option where you had, like, they'd be 10 people sitting around the table, and if they started with me and you were sitting next to me, I got beef, you got chicken. The next person got beef, the next person got chicken. And I don't know, man. Maybe it's because I'm Southern and I'm fat and whatever else. But if I'm paying $55 for something to eat, I want to be able to pick what I want. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
So we chose to do a buffet style banquet, so you can go get what you want if you want. And if there's not, because I was raised not to waste, Carey. So if it comes on my plate, I need to eat it. And if I don't have a choice to what goes on my plate, I could be wasting. So we just decided to do a buffet style banquet, and then we gonna do. I think kids 12 and under are free, but 12 and over would have to pay $55 for the banquet. All the money goes to the UGBA, and actually a third of the money goes to the UGBA, a third goes to RLA, Rural Lifestyle Alliance, and a third goes to the state hosting it, which would be South Carolina.
Right. And so people can go to ugba.net and they can they can go to ugba.net, and there's a link to get that special rate on the hotel. There's a link to get your banquet tickets, and there's also a link for you to join. So if you're not a member, you can go ahead and join, and you'll get a membership card in the mail. But I will say, I guarantee you, if you show up Friday night with some money in your hand, somebody will give you a membership card.
Yeah, we'll have memberships available there. And as far as the banquet goes, we've got to let them know a few weeks ahead of time how much food to prepare. Yep. So we ain't got an overdose, a lot of food left over. So if you want your banquet ticket, you need to go ahead and get it online, so that way we know exactly how many people we're cooking for, and not have so we don't have a lot of food wasted. And we also don't want to sell extra tickets after we get there on Saturday and not have enough food for everybody that's already paid in advance.
Yeah, if you go to ugba.net and try and click on shop, and you don't see the link there for banquet tickets, it's past the day. And that's a hard deadline, because they've got to know how much food is needed and everything else for the event. So we got that set up.
And we got some good speakers going to be there for the convention also. We got Monique Parker from F.E. McGinnis will be there speaking about treatment of various diseases. Jeff Maddox will be there speaking about nutrition. And then Courtney Watts, who's the state vet of one of South Carolina state vets, she'll be there talking about avian influenza, Merrick's, several other things she's got a topic on. So, and there'll be a Q&A for every person who speaks. There'll be a Q&A afterwards, so you better get answers for your questions right then on the spot. And who in their right mind wouldn't want to come to Myrtle Beach and see Jeff Maddox? I mean, just saying. Did I lose you? You ain't got no volume, Carey. Still no volume, Carey. Not for me anyway. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can now. Yeah.
Okay.
You muted me, didn't you? Did you mute me?
No. I did want to say that John said that he used Jeff's method with the rocks and the sand, and it does flow down, but it don't get rocky. Eventually, it'll turn to like a dirt, and the water still flows through it. So that's really good.
Oh yeah. And we talked about something earlier, and I'm in my beady room, and I have a sprayer here, and I don't know if you can see what I'm talking about, but that's the end off of an old garden hose. I want to make sure everybody understood what we're talking about. That's the end off of old garden hose. If you just smash this now, it's going to spray 25 feet. If you put this on there and screw it on tight, it's going to flow out of here just like it would flow out of here, out of the hose itself without a sprayer.
Now and, that's what works if you're about 5'9".
This right here, the short sprayer.
Yeah, mine's 2 foot long.
Yeah, but this is only to fill up my bitty water trays on my brooders.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's so short. It's longer in my pens.
Yeah, I don't like bending over.
But see, it flows out like a normal flow. Maybe everybody can see that. I don't know. But anyway, just so everybody understands. That's why we make sure everybody understood what we were talking about earlier. That piece of hose makes a huge difference.
That's solid redneck ingenuity right there is what it is. At its finest.
And honestly, the way I figured that out was we had nothing to do with chickens. Anybody that knows me knows I bred reptiles for 20 years. And you wanted to fill their water bowls up every day or every other day and not wet the bedding in the pen, because if you wet the bedding in the pen, it causes all kind of problems. So we figured out if we put that piece of hose on there, it didn't spray the water bowls over. And so as soon as I realized it would work that way, I went to my chicken yard and fixed all my water hoses in my chicken yard with pieces of water hoses like that.
I mean, it works. It makes sense. I don't see why not. I've also got a molting guide, and I'm going to put that molt guide in the Jitter Juice group, and I'll get it uploaded to the website as well. I think I can add files on that website. So I'll get that out. If anybody wants a copy of a molting guide, shoot me an email and we'll get back. And yes, Peter, you are lucky. Jeff will be there in about 3 weeks. Jeff is leaving Friday to go to the Philippines for a little while, and he will be at Jin's place in about 3 weeks. And we're going to see if his Wi-Fi is good enough. Because I told Jeff I want to get a virtual tour, because we talked a few weeks ago about going over there for school and getting Jin to teach classes, and I felt like if we could get a tour of the place, more people might be into it. So he hasn't not thought about the idea more. So that's a thing, and we're still looking at doing that somewhere around January, February at the latest. But I'm going to try to get Jeff to walk around and give us a tour. Does anybody have any questions? All right. See y'all next week.